What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If you are new to the channel, consider subscribing. We do college football here year-round, every single day. You can find segments, right? We do the live show here after the big games on Saturdays, and we ain't got but a few of those left as we're into the nitty-gritty of the season where what you are going to be is being defined this weekend and next. Okay? LSU goes from a Tier 1 SEC program to a Tier 2 SEC program, just like that. It was that simple. You lose to A&M, you lose to Alabama, and now we don't really have to talk about you in the realm of college football playoff anymore. That's where we are at. Other people that made the case for themselves, Ole Miss, right? They get a tremendously cool win against Georgia at home. Same Georgia that went on the road to beat Texas to hand them their only L. The same Georgia that came back and then eventually lost to Alabama, right? The same Alabama that lost to Vanderbilt. Like up and down the SEC, basically everybody but Auburn has presented themselves at one point or another this season as you're going to have to come get it. Even South Carolina tonight was able to hand Vanderbilt a 21-point loss, right? This is as Texas fans are trying to tell me that, hey, our best win is not Oklahoma or Michigan. Our best win is Vanderbilt. You mean the same Vanderbilt that just got his ass handed to him by South Carolina, that Vanderbilt? Like I was getting some conversation here because, hey, look, we talking about Texas now as opposed to Texas earlier because I want to save it for the show because I'm like, is that one of the three best teams in college football? I think there's an argument for it. Like if you're looking at the college football playoffs top 25, Texas was at 5, Miami's at 4, right? Georgia's at 3. The two teams in front of Texas lost today, okay? That in and of itself would make a great reason to move Texas into the 3 spot, to say nothing of just how we think Texas moves, right? We know that the quarterback is good. We know that they are good on the outside. We know that they are good defensively. It's a well-coached and very good football team that happened to run into a Georgia buzzsaw that had its Jalen Milroe game against them at DKR. Okay, behind them, though, you got an argument for an undefeated Indiana, who is 10-0, by the way, and 10-0 for the first time ever, 10 wins for the first time ever. And yeah, did they need to hold on to beat Michigan? Is Michigan the first team that they didn't beat by 14 points? Yeah, all of that is true. It was 17-15 late. It became 20-15, and that's how it goes out. Sharon Moore managed the clock like it was broken. It just wasn't a great look. But Indiana won a nasty football game. And you like to see that from a program that you expect to contend for a college football playoff spot. That's what you expect. So as I'm looking at this, I have to genuinely ask myself, is it Miami? Is it Georgia? Is it Texas? Is it Penn State? Is it Tennessee? Is it Indiana? Is it BYU? BYU is still playing right now. We'll have something more about them a little bit later on, I'm sure. But right now, it feels like we're having the conversation of would Texas beat Indiana or would Indiana beat Texas? If you're looking at resumes, you got to give that one to Texas, even with the loss to Georgia, right? Because Indiana still hasn't beaten a team with a number next to its name, and it's beaten just a couple of teams that have had winning records this season. However, I looked at Indiana this year like I looked at Clemson in 2015, like I looked at Clemson in 2018, right? The ACC was watered down. We did not respect it. But Clemson just kept running through people and then winning games that they needed to. Like during that 2018 run, they were tested by Syracuse, and we were going, is this team any good? We don't know. Right? They play in a conference that was not really that stacked, and beneath them, it got nasty in a hurry. But Clemson railroaded Alabama, railroaded straight through to the national championship 15-0 with a true freshman at quarterback. Indiana reminds me a lot of those teams. I don't know that we need to rank them at number 3 right now, but if they keep winning and other teams keep losing, it's going to happen either way. Like, I do expect that Ohio State-Indiana will be a top 5 matchup if Ohio State can get past Northwestern, stop the mud hole in Purdue and walk to dry today. And then we'll see, right? Then we'll see. The other thing that's nice for Indiana this year is they only have to play Ohio State. There's no Michigan. There's no Penn State on the, there's no more Michigan. There's no Penn State, and there's only Ohio State on the schedule. So they could achieve the Big Ten dream of knocking off Michigan, Ohio State, and your in-state rival in Purdue in the same year. And then, Lord help them, they might be able to host a playoff game against Notre Dame, which I would love nothing more. The thing that is making me most upset about Notre Dame's run right now is that they're sliding into that 5 to 8 range, which means they get to host a home game, which is everything Notre Dame ever wants. They don't care about the rest of it. They want to host a playoff game at home in Notre Dame, Indiana, at Notre Dame Stadium. Whatever we got to do to get them out of that, we got to try, right? But then again, Navy went down there and they got their behinds kicked, right, at MetLife. Army's going to get an opportunity. Army is 9-0. Army feels like a good football team, and then you barely get past North Texas, which is a winning football program, but it's 14-3, right? Bryson Daly did not have his peak performance day, but he did have 153 yards on the ground and both touchdowns in his return, right? Because they didn't have him last week against Air Force. That was Dwayne Coleman. So as we're talking about undefeated teams and we're talking about resumes, I think what we're going to see is Texas move up to the 3 spot because they stomped out Florida, and Florida pushed Georgia into the deep water with a third-string quarterback, without the 2 best wide receivers, without their best corner, without their best running back. Like, it's very much the B team for Florida that's been playing the last couple of weeks. And it felt like DJ Lagway would have been able to go in an emergency, but they went with Aiden Warner, and Aiden Warner played like Aiden Warner would play against Texas, right? That it's 49-17. Through the middle of the second quarter, all anybody wanted to talk about was whether or not Florida was going to get shut out. I think if you're going to ding Texas for anything, it's that you didn't shut out Florida. You should have. It's the third-string quarterback, right? It's not your starters at tailback. It's not your starters at wideout. Certainly not your starters at corner. You should hold that team to nothing, and you didn't. Ohio State held Purdue to nothing. That matters. Matter of fact, Ohio State has held its last 2 opponents defensively to nothing, scoring TDs, right? So, like, you give up the 6 points to Penn State in field goals. You've given up 64 points to 8 opponents this year. You haven't allowed a TD since the 4th quarter of the Nebraska game. That's what I expect from Texas. And that's why Ohio State will be 2. For me, I think Texas is going to be 3. And then we have a conversation about 4. And that's also interesting because BYU doesn't win the Holy War going away. We can have a great discussion about whether or not Indiana's a better football team than BYU. BYU gets to say we beat Southern Methodist. That's their trump card, right? Southern Methodist, who's idle this week, is in first place in the ACC because of Miami's loss today. They got a half-game lead, right? They're 5-0 in conference play. Miami's now 5-1. So perhaps it's more like BYU at 4 and then Indiana at 5. But once again, it's going to work itself out. I'm curious to see what anybody does with Notre Dame at the end of this thing, too, because they got another decisive win against Florida State. Florida State ain't no good. They're 1-9. We're going to need to study just what the hell happened to Florida State this year because to be bad, all right, be 5-7, right? Be 4-8. They're 1-9, guys. That's tough. I don't know what you're going to do with that if you're FSU fan. You're going, well, I guess we got Mike Norvell coming back next year after you gave him all this money to go get players and it didn't work out. I just don't see that one happening, dog. I'm also really interested to see what the rest of the ACC does, as when we're starting this, Virginia leads number 19 Pittsburgh, team that I thought was going to be really good, all of a sudden got stomped out by SMU, and now it looks like losing to a Virginia team that ain't very good themselves. So we'll see how that goes. We will. I think once you get past 5, you get to have a better, cooler conversation about the next teams that get into the college football playoff based on the rankings. I think Boise State narrowly pulling out a win against 3-7 Nevada ought to hurt them, but it won't because we just don't have a great team behind them in the group of 5 other than Army. And that's interesting. Would you put Army in the spot that you got Boise State in right now? I think you kind of have to at this point because Nevada's 3-7 going into this game. You gotta stomp them out. You have to. Ashton Jeanty needs to play lights out. He put the ball on the floor in that game. He also had 34 rushes for 209 yards. So I could see Army closing the gap there, right? If Army's undefeated at the end of this thing and they end up winning the conference championship against, say, an undefeated Tulane in conference play, it's going to be real difficult for me to tell you that Boise State needs to be in that 12th spot. We might end up with a service academy in that 12th spot in the first year of the college football playoff, which I don't think would hurt anybody's feelings except, we like watching Ashton Jeanty play football. So that discussion is going to be ongoing. I think that one's really interesting and cool.